Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It's Jeremy Werner, joined by Mike LaTulip. And Mike, that was kind of a meltdown against Michigan State. We'll talk about that. And we got two huge matchups for Illinois. I got to check the AP top 25. I didn't see if Wisconsin crashed the top 10 because it just came out, but Duke certainly is in there. Two huge opportunities, but huge, scary opportunities as well, as these two teams are playing incredibly, incredibly well. But Mike, how are you, man? Good to see you.
I'm good. I'm doing well. A lot of.
I don't know if everyone else listening is good. I don't know if everyone else listening is good.
Hey, luckily, there's a lot of really good college basketball on this weekend to kind of cleanse the palate. But yeah, between the way that game finished, and really what happened at halftime, to be honest, all those things coupled together made a not a good recipe.
Yeah, it was a bad night. It was a bad night for Illini athletics, and it's such a shame that mishap happened with the banner. Kudos to Josh Whitman for coming out, owning it, all of that, Mike. But what I did on the podcast, we talked about it, said like that stuff can't happen. It just certainly can't happen. But at the same time, I wanted to talk about Terrence and his career, like because we did that after Kofi got honored. So before we dive into what was a bad day for Illinois athletics, I mean, Terrence Shannon just went up to the rafters, even if it was botched by Illinois there. But he deserves that spot. And now that banner is hanging, and just want to get your thoughts on Terrence Shannon's impact in his 2 years, especially that last year.
I tried my best when we were in it. I think you and I did a pretty good job as we went end of the season to Big Ten tournament to round by round of the NCAA tournament to just continue to remind ourselves what we were witnessing, to continue to remind ourselves how unique it is. And even when you zoom out, how unique it is to have the amount of guys that you've had that have been able to put their jersey up there. Because you see other fan bases, they don't understand. They think they're just retiring jerseys because you're just, no one can ever wear 0 again or 21 again or 11 again when two guys on this team are wearing two of those numbers. But it's hitting a criteria that, and I'd have to go back and look. I'm not sure how many teams in college basketball have had three different guys be All-Americans in the last 5 years. Honestly, it's you can on the outside say it's, your jerseys are going up there too often at Illinois, but if you're hitting a criteria that is rarely hit, in a 15-year span for a program, a 20-year span for a program, they did it 3 times in 5 years. And Terrence, like that, thinking back, and I'll go back every now and then and watch that Big Ten tournament, highlights from that Big Ten tournament. It's insane, man. It's insane. And then one of my favorite clips of the season last year was him diving on the ball against Morehead State, throwing it off of Riley Minix's leg out of bounds. And I think it's, he's parlayed that into minutes now with the Minnesota Timberwolves because you got this prolific scorer in college basketball that just, you knew when he got to the NBA, the scoring wasn't going to be at the volume that he usually got it in college basketball. But Terrence always went full tilt. And I think that's what people are seeing with him in the NBA now is he's just a wrecking ball. And he plays hard and he plays the right way. So, seeing him come back and get his moment, it wasn't, the moment could have been better for sure. Yeah. That goes without saying. But for him to come back, for Kofi to come back last week, I mean, it's as far as individual players, it's just kind of a golden era of Illinois basketball the last 5 years.
Well, you mentioned it. I mean, it'd been 15 years since a player qualified for that. D. Brown was the last one, and they raised all of those in 2008, I think is when they started doing it. So it'd been a very long time since anyone had qualified or had the kind of career to do it, and have 3 guys, and as you said, a 4 or 5 year span there. It's pretty unbelievable. It's a kudos to Brad Underwood for getting that type of talent and developing and getting the most out of that talent. His staff, obviously Tim Anderson and all these guys, Chin Coleman, Orlando Antigua, and then obviously the guys who are there now on staff. So it is quite an accomplishment and quite a run for Illinois. That said, Mike, what a meltdown against State. I mean, I was thinking there, 31-15, you're thinking, all right, this team is putting it all together. Here we go. They beat Michigan State. They go into next week. you have a chance to beat Wisconsin and Duke, and maybe they're back on track. And then it all just went downhill, and obviously it really went downhill in the final 5 minutes. So how the heck did that implosion happen?
I think when you have a young team, there's going to be peaks and valleys throughout the season. And a lot of times with young teams, that's from game to game. Really good game, not so good game, not so good game. The peaks and valleys within 40 minutes with this team is just, it's gotten to a level that is goes beyond, I think, just youth and inexperience. I think when you're playing against a team like Michigan State, and I had talked about this during the game, you can't drop your hands. You can't drop your hands in a fist fight against them. You'll get knocked out. I mean, that's just, and I'll give them a lot of credit because they got down early. And Jackson Kohler, who now has I think 33% of his career 3-point makes in that game after 3 years of college basketball. But I just thought that last 8 minutes, and there were tells even earlier in the game. Once Illinois got up 17-6 after the second Jake Davis 3, you built that lead getting to the basket and getting paint touches. And then once you kind of got that bug of, oh man, threes are going in, you have to be able to remind yourself that, how that all got started. And even when they took that lead, I mean, the 2 Jake Davis threes, you got a guy helping in from the ball side corner, drive and kick. And then he circles up for a dribble handoff and a guy goes under. And he reads it. Like, both of those are off of reading the defense and not having this in your mind where it's like, I got to get one up. So, yeah. And then we'll get into the last 8.5 minutes, but you can't lose your minds like that. I thought they lost their minds, and they didn't have to. That's what was crazy about it. A lot of it was self-inflicted. I didn't think, Michigan State played hard. They always play hard, but to me, this was more on Illinois than it was something crazy that Michigan State was doing to provoke that and to make them start getting frantic.
I'm sure I've seen something like it, but in the moment, I just feel like I haven't. 8:30 without scoring, 19 straight missed shots to miss a game. How does that happen, Mike?
It happens. It doesn't happen to good teams, and this is a good Illinois team. And so that's what's baffling to me is that the shots that you missed, and it was a mixed bag, right? They didn't take 19 bad shots. The second shot that they took that would have ended this drought and we wouldn't even be talking about it was a Kasparas Yakashonis layup that I have no idea how it didn't go in. I mean, he just flips it up on the glass, hits the backboard, hits the front rim, and then goes off the back rim and come. It was crazy. But the majority of the shots that they took, a lot of them from 3. I understand the math of like, hey, if we get them up and we're a really good offensive rebounding team, when you miss that badly short on that many shots, it doesn't matter if you're a good offensive rebounding team because you're not going to have as much of a chance to track those down. So that was part of the issue. But like when the mentality flips to settling, which I thought they did, they settled, you rob yourself of your aggression. And when you rob yourself of your aggression, not only do you, rush shots and all that, but the actual finishing that you have around the rim isn't with the same toughness that you were doing with earlier in the game. I mean, KJ misses a point blank layup. Morez Johnson, we've seen him shot fake and get that ball on the rim multiple times. Can't get it to the rim. Tomislava Visic misses like a 6-foot hook shot. And so it's like, there's a softness that creeps into you when you flip that mindset into settling. And honestly, like everything became so rushed and frantic. And there's a lot of responsibility when you're a point guard. A lot of that started with KJ.
Mm-hmm.
Like when KJ gets really frantic and revved up and rushing shots, like there's a ripple effect that it has on the team. And I think it's just, that's a young guy and a really talented young guy learning a really valuable lesson is when we need to settle in, it's on me.
Yeah.
I have to settle us in. And we'll get into coaching and Brad Underwood and all that. But on the court as a point guard, that is so key That like you have a chance to be the real calming influence during turbulence like that. So, like I said, 12 and 19 of those shots were threes, and you can't tell me they're high quality shots. A lot of them. The Ben three on the wing that started it was a good shot. I mean, it was on track the whole way. It missed back rim. Tomislav's three in the corner. KJ probably could have finished a layup or at least got one on the rim. Booker was rotating over late. Not a bad shot. Probably could have had a better shot if KJ just goes up with it. But there were plenty in there. Probably 7 of the 12 threes, 8 of the 12 threes maybe were just short and really forced rush shots. And what that does is plays into Michigan State, who, they're one of the best transition teams in the country and play with pace. You're just giving them runouts at that point. So it was a mixed bag of not good stuff in the last 8.5 minutes.
Speaking of Terrence Shannon, one of the things he's, I guess, gifted me is the appreciation for free throws, Mike, and the appreciation of how easy those points are and what drawing and being physical and aggressive, what that can do for your team, especially when you're struggling to shoot, because it's going to happen. And early on in this season, we saw this team get to the free throw line a lot. They got into the bonus with 13 minutes left, and they shot one free throw the rest of the game, the missed front end by Tomislav Ivicic. And that just got to be a smarter team of we got to attack the basket. But let's get into, I want to bring up the defensive side of this too, but the Brad Underwood part of this, because, well, I find the ridiculousness of some of the vocal minority saying, he's never going to get it done here. Like, that's ridiculous to me. He's a really good coach. What he's done here is unbelievable. But I do think there are criticisms for this year. They have underachieved to their talent level in the Big Ten so far. They're still going to make the tournament. I still think they got a chance to win some games here at the end of the year. But what do you want to see the coach do when that is happening? Yeah, this is 8.5 minutes. He had a lot of time to make a change or say something. Like, what do you want from the coach in those moments when something like this is happening?
Illinois versus Texas at Madison Square Garden in 2022, December of 2022. And they started settling early. Camera pans to Brad Underwood, and he's saying, drive the effing ball in a very demonstrative way. And so, look, I think when you're sitting in mid-February, and you're talking about, well, Dre and Trey and, got to get him back in. And like, there's still some searching going on here and trying to find lineups that I think make sense. And there might've been a bit of an overreaction from the second half against Ohio State that potentially led to some of the lineup changes. And, but the other thing, when you have a young team, a really talented young team in this program, and I think part of the reason why recruits want to come to Illinois is because there is a freedom that you have playing at Illinois. And I think Brad's been vocal about that. Like, we let our players play. And for a guy like KJ, for a guy like Will Riley, I mean, that's great. When you get autonomy, you get freedom. But I think
it was great for 32 minutes the other night, right? With
100%. Yeah. I mean, like but there's a balance there to where I think, sometimes there needs to be more of like a grabbing of the reins, I think, with a young team. I mean, and we can get our judgment clouded by how talented this team is, but they still need that in-game direction. And I mean, I sit there and I'm like, well, I don't understand why Brad would have to say they need to drive the basketball. They should know they need to drive the basketball. But sometimes, like, when you're on the court and you're in the game, it may not be that simple. So it may need to be spelled out and very directly said to them. And that's only going to help them. And as a coach, like, you don't want to take away from someone's confidence and ability to shoot the ball, but you also want to look at it and think, okay, well, if we get downhill and get to the free throw line, shooting free throws and getting in rhythm is only going to help if you get another outside look that's catch and shooting, a quality look. So yeah, I mean, I think it's understanding it's a 180 from the team last year in terms of experience. And Brad's had to shape shift a little bit, I think, his coaching style to to match the personnel and to match who he has on the floor and what the experience level is. And I think we all kind of fell for it. And maybe Brad did too, when you look at how good this team, I think still is, but was, and how they had kind of, I don't want to say peaked early, but had shown their ceiling earlier than we expected. And then you go through it, and he's also seen them every day in practice. And you know what I guarantee they're doing in practice? Making shots. Yeah. So it's just like, it's
not in games.
It's hard, but I'll put a bow on it by saying, as you go from year to year and as you have varying degrees of experience and personnel, like, it's going to require you to, I think, have your thumb on the pulse a little bit more and not allow too much freedom for some of these guys.
Are you ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active and busy lifestyle. And with over 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. So you can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. And Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. So reach your goals this new year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Illini50off and use code Illini50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Illini50off at factormeals.com/Illini50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Yeah, Mike, I think you're hitting on it. Like, I think you said it. I still think he's searching for this, like what he has to do with this team. Isn't he? Like, is that pretty clear to you that he's still like searching for answers? It felt like he had settled on this rotation. And then after the game, he's like, yeah, probably should have played Draven Gibbs-Allhorn more. Trey White, I don't know how he fits into this thing right now, but you could have used Dre's edge and intensity at some points, even if, defensively, I don't know if his height and his smallness kind of has hurt him a little bit, but you know what he's going to bring. He's going to get tunnel vision of the rim at some point when that team needed it. So it still feels like he's still searching for all those things with this team.
Yeah, I think they came into the season and there was this idea of like, well, we want to pace and space and shoot threes. And then you get kind of wrapped up in, second half against Ohio State, the Minnesota game. You're like, whoa, like this is exactly what we've been waiting for. And, you do it again against UCLA and it works out. And then you play against a team like Michigan State and, you start the game 3 for 4 from 3, you're still feeling pretty good. But like, the difference too is that Minnesota game, things were a lot easier. It was Minnesota. And there were communication breakdowns for them defensively. And like where I think this team can be better is just because something is not as easy doesn't mean you just stop trying to do it. Because that's what I saw in the last 8.5 minutes of that game was like, you know what? Michigan State's they're on top of the rotations a little bit. They're getting into us, ball pressure. This isn't as easy as it was against Minnesota, trying to get into the paint and dice them up. But that's a time to double down on what you're doing. And it's just, it may take a few more passes, a few more screens, a few more cuts, and that's okay. You may not get a shot up in the first 7 seconds of the shot clock. You may off a miss, but when teams start scoring like that, you got to find ways to fight through that first level of resistance defensively from a really good defensive team in Michigan State. So I'm curious here against Wisconsin coming up. I mean, Trey White killed Wisconsin. Killed them. And, you're finding this like struggle, I think, between, well, we want to have guys out there that like pace and space and can shoot it. It gives us better flow and optionality offensively. But how much are we sacrificing in other areas when that happens? So like, it's just, again, that's why I said that feels like they're searching, because I don't like, there's certain parts where I feel like Trey fits in. There's certain parts where I feel like he doesn't. There's certain parts where I think Dre fits in. There's certain parts where I think he doesn't. I mean, it's going to have to be what we saw last year at the end of the year. I think it's going to be a game by game thing. And what that's going to be hard on some players.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy. Like this isn't a video game where you just sub a guy in, sub a guy out, and there's not like kind of emotional mindset shifts there. So what Trey White are you getting when he comes back? Is it the same that you had last time you played Wisconsin? I don't know. That's the human element of this.
Yeah. The one thing about Trey, when he's aggressive, he gets to the free throw line. That's something they could have used the other day. We got to talk about this defensive regression. Like we were surprised about this defense, and I guess we should have been because they have not been very good outside the top 100 in the country over the last 5 weeks here, Mike. So what's behind that right now?
I think when you have instability in your lineups, that's always going to be a factor. Actually, I mean, outside of the last, probably 5 minutes of the first half and 2.5 minutes of the second half, I really think the defense was that bad.
Yeah.
I mean, they were really good early, and we've seen those flashes. But again, when you fall into the trap of settling and shooting threes, it puts strain on that defense. It really does. So, they've always played, after the first 2 years of Brad being here, they started playing just a really soft coverage that prevents you from shooting a high volume amount of threes. And, it's going to force those mid-range shots, and that's okay. Like, I mean, the shots that Michigan State took were fine shots in terms of like what you want to force defensively, but there's a difference between guys feeling you and guys not feeling you. Like, I didn't think in that second half, guys really felt the Illinois defenders. I mean, you come off a curl screen or come off a ball screen, they're in drop coverage, and it's just you're shooting with the wind at your back. And there's no like what Coleman had to overcome last year as an undersized 5 was like, hey, I may not be the best in drop coverage, or I may not be the best if you post me, but in drop coverage, like I'm going to stunt, I'm going to be active, I'm going to get my hand on a ball, and I'm going to at least have you have some sort of indecision when you come off that ball screen to buy the guy time coming back over the top. But if you don't do any of that, if you're just kind of, going 80% fighting over the top, and you're like, hey, we just want to funnel to our bigs, but then the bigs are just kind of worried about the lob, and there's no activity. You're just kind of like showing your hands and backing up. That's defeating the purpose of what you're trying to do, because you still want to be active, even though it's a softer coverage, so to speak. You're not hard hedging. And I know people saw Indiana go zone and wanted Illinois to go zone. It's just, I think the defense was the issue. You just got to play your defense better. And I think they're capable of that down the stretch.
Mike, because we saw so much consistency last year, the most inconsistent team we saw with Brad was the 22-23 team. Do you get similar vibes with this group, just game to game? Because it feels like they don't string a lot of losses together. I mean, they've only lost back-to-back games once. It's just they're struggling to stack wins here.
Those teams are different to me. I think that team didn't have a clear pecking order, in my opinion. Terrence came on midway through that season as trying to kind of take over as the alpha, but there were questions about it. I thought that team, even just being there live, a lot of times that team had more issues with off the court stuff. And I'm not even saying like maybe there was some in the locker room, but I'm just talking about like on the bench.
Yeah.
I mean, there was like a clear, there were clear disruptors, I think, of what you were trying to do. I don't get the sense of that with this team. I think this team's just really young, and trying to like go through the ebbs and flows of the season. Cause like one thing that I want to touch on is, we don't get the luxury anymore in college basketball because of the portal. You may have Will Riley and Kasper Shakashonis go to the NBA, and we don't get to see, like, this year is like very emblematic of what a first year with a young team would look like.
Yeah.
For anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, Arkansas is going through it right now. But the issue is that like you may not see the second year of this team.
Right.
To be able to push through and learn from their mistakes and continue to build. I mean, this is just like we kind of truncate things into like a 35 game season, but like this group, you try to expedite the process and get things ramped up and try to get closer and closer to your ceiling. But sometimes for teams, in a group, that happens in game 50. That happens in game 45. But you may never get there with a certain group.
Yeah.
So you got to like try to rush it into one season. So, I mean, Arkansas is a great example again. It's like they started to figure out, they're starting to win a little bit more consistently. And you know what? All those guys might be gone next year.
Yeah.
So it's just that's what's really tough. And that's why I think it's different than that team. But at the same time, like that team was a lot different from one year to the next. More guys came in and older guys came in. And so we'll see. I mean, I would love to see the core of this group. I mean, obviously outside of KJ and Will, if they decided to come back, great. But I don't think they will. But I'd love to see the core of this group come back to like be able to see that year-to-year progression, because we saw it with even just with Terrence and Coleman coming back, how much of a difference that made.
No, absolutely. And it's like when you had this off season, obviously KJ became something different, and you knew Will had the potential to be a one and done, but you thought it could be a 2-year plan. Now I think Ivisic should be back for another year. I think Morez should be back for another year, and we'll see with Boswell and Trey White, right? Like we got to see if they can do it. Ben Rickhouse has potentially another year of eligibility. Dre Gibbs Allhorn, but like there's always questions year to year about how many are you actually going to bring back. But now that I'm thinking about it, I thought of this the other night. Like who could be the next one that could have their jersey in the rafters? It's not easy. We just talked about that.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Like Will, could it be? Like if he came back for another year, Will is good enough to be an All-American next year. Like he is that talented. I just don't think he'll be back. Is Morez Johnson that guy?
That's exactly where I thought you were going.
That was my take, like thinking after the game. I didn't do it on the post-game podcast, but him as a junior, can he be like a she-boy? Like Morez is playing really well. I didn't think his defensive rebounding were great the other night, but you can just see him like that. He's always had the light bulb on, but like there's just even more confidence and comfort with him, especially in the offensive end right now.
And this goes without saying, he is very, very close to the top of the list in terms of guys you want to make damn sure come back next year.
Oh yeah, he's everything you want in your program, right? Like,
he is a stabilizing force because you know exactly what you're going to get from him. Again, I don't really coin myself as the body language doctor. I do focus on it. But he has had such a good attitude throughout this whole entire year. He's played games where he's played less than 10 minutes. And, whether it's 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 25 minutes, you know exactly what you're going to get with Morez. And I've talked about it for years that coaches have a lot of comfort in that. And, same goes for, Jake Davis's jersey won't be up in the rafters, but it's the same type of thing with Jake Davis. And like the more guys that you have where you can get predictability. I talked about Brad searching right now. He's not searching with those guys.
No,
that's not, those guys aren't an issue.
And I think I think that's why Dre getting some more playing time would make sense too, because you're never searching for it with him, right?
No, like you don't search for it with Dre in terms of like his energy and his effort. I think he always brings that. It's just a matter of like
decision making
and his hair is always going to be a little bit on fire, but how big is that flame? Right. I mean, I think that's part of the unpredictability with Dre, but yeah, I mean, Morez, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this is a guy that's like, we get this guy for multiple years for sure. Right. Like it's just before the portal day and age and NIL day and age. This is a guy that you look at as like a cornerstone for your program moving forward. And I really hope that that's what ends up happening. Cause he can be like a Trent Frazier. He can be like an Io and guys that stayed here for 3+ years, 5 in Trent's case, and really just, leave a legacy. Mm-hmm. And that it may end up being All-American. It may not be, but Trent was an All-American and Trent's loved. And, and Trent wasn't even a first or second team all Big Ten guy, I don't think. Right. Morez can be that. Morez can be a all league guy next year, I think. So it's, you just want the continuity. Just that's all you want from year to year. And Morez would that'd go a long way, getting Morez back.
Man, like if you told me you were getting Morez, Ivicic, and Will Riley back, I'd feel really, really good, Mike. Really good. But Will's gonna probably be a first round pick, so it's hard to pass that up.
Well, I think if you get Morez and Tommy back, and I'm not saying that's it, but just start there.
Yeah.
You get those two.
It's great.
I mean, you see the difference when you can really fortify not only the front court, but those two bigs together, and the way that they can play together. That's a great starting point. And then maybe Kylan can get going here at the end of the season and get some momentum into next year, because I think we felt really good about Kylan earlier in the season. He's obviously it feels like he's hit a little bit of a inconsistent stretch here, but yeah, I mean it's, and then trying to maybe fill the pieces with other veteran guys. I don't get too much into next season. That feels morbid, but
yeah. All right, but you have plenty of opportunities here, Mike. But these are two tough ones. Wisconsin is hot. Since you beat them back in December, they've won 12 of 14, one of the top offenses in the country during that time. So Tuesday night, what are the keys at Kohl Center for Illinois?
I think you think back to what won you the game in Champaign, and it was really pretty much saying Tanji and Blackwell and Klesmit, those guys aren't going to beat us. It's going to have to be Nolan Winter. It's going to have to be Carter Gilmore. It's going to have to be Stephen Crowell. It's going to have to be McGee. And, you were plugging gaps. Ben Hummergaz was a really big key in that game because of the way he was able to plug gaps and prevent those guys from getting downhill and getting to the free throw line. They shoot free throws and not only better than anybody in America, but better than any team, I think, ever. They're an 85% free throw shooting team, which is crazy, but you can't let them get going early, especially John Tanji. I mean, I was thinking about this during the Purdue game. I'm watching him. I'm watching his shot. I'm watching the way he drives. Is there anybody that he reminds you of? Because there was somebody that stuck out to me, and I was like, holy cow, that is very, very close to
Illinois guy?
Yes.
You play with him?
Yes.
Ravante Rice.
It's the shot, the way he attacks and kind of like gets down. It's crazy. So when you play against a guy like that, you cannot let him get downhill with a full head of steam. He's such a confrontational driver.
They did an unbelievable job with him last game.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, part of it, you had foul trouble in the first half. But that's the other thing. I mean, it's another reason why you don't want to settle in a game like this. You want to try to get, try to take Klesmit and Blackwell and Tanjay off the bounce. Try to, make them guard. Don't let them just, chill and see you chuck up shots and then get out and transition. I mean, their transition points are as high. I think Trotter had put this out the other day, but their transition points are higher than ever at Wisconsin. And they put on an offensive performance against Purdue that hadn't been done in 15 years in Division I college basketball. So you got to think that they're coming into that game with a lot of confidence. So it'll be a really good one. And it's as grim as things felt on Saturday night, you go into the Kohl Center and get a win, the needle starts to move a little bit again.
Yeah, and then you go into a Duke matchup with nothing to lose, everything to gain at Madison Square Garden on Saturday. Top prospect in all basketball right now with Cooper Flagg. Obviously, the ACC stinks this year, Mike, but this team is good in any conference. Just so many NBA draft prospects on this roster. So what do you think of that matchup against Duke?
If you want to test yourself against one of the best teams in the country and a team that I think is in that top tier with Alabama and Auburn, here's your shot Saturday night. And it's the ultimate cut it loose game, man. If I'm Duke, I'm kind of terrified. Maybe terrified is probably aggressive, but this is just an Illinois team that when they do truly cut it loose and get out of their own way and can just kind of play free but play smart. I mean, I talked about the freedom element earlier in the game. I mean, you don't want to just get wrapped up in the Madison Square Garden set. I mean, that place is going to be nuts. I mean, I was going to go out there for the game, couldn't get tickets, and I wasn't about to pay $1,400 for tickets either. But it's going to be a really great atmosphere. It's a primetime game, and you gotta balance the environment with hey, what's the game plan? the 3 teams that have beat Duke this year, Kansas, Kentucky, and Clemson, are all top 10 in the country in experience. That is not you.
Yeah.
And all 3 of them were really physical with Cooper Flagg, tried to knock him off his spots. So you got to be physical with him. And then you got to, against this Duke defense, you got to find the balance of, hey, we don't want to rush shots, but we also can't hang around and try to say, well, you know what? If we don't have a good one, let's find a great one. You may not get a great one against them. Some possessions you may not get a good one. So you got to step up confidently, get downhill, get to the rim, definitely play off 2 feet against this team, or Cooper Flagg and Malawach, and those guys are going to be playing, Malik Brown, playing volleyball off the backboard. So it's as far as tests go, I mean, you want to test yourself against the best and see where you stack up and maybe turn some heads nationally. That's you got 2 really good opportunities to do it this week.
Their big man is lottery draft pick, Knoppel, lottery pick, Proctor, really, really good. But for people who haven't watched a lot of Cooper Flagg, Mike, what are we going to see on Saturday?
I think he's a generational prospect. And there's been a lot of really good picks that have come out of not only just Duke, but number 1 picks over the years out of college basketball. There is nobody in college basketball that impacts the game the way Cooper Flagg does. And there's a reason that, although the numbers are certainly gaudy in ACC play, still really good on the year, but his impact goes way beyond just counting stats. His impact defensively, you'll see that if you haven't watched him on Saturday. He has it all, and I think it's the reason why these teams are tanking pretty hard in the NBA to try to get their hands on a guy like that, because that's a guy that even last year, when he had just turned 17, was playing in the the trials, essentially, playing with the USA team, scrimmaging against the USA team, the Olympic team that went to Paris.
And
so holding his own and playing really well. If that gives you any indication, really good player.
Yeah. This is gonna be fun.
Are you going out there?
Yeah, we're all going out there.
Good.
Yeah,
I mean, if you said you were hanging back, I would have questioned that for sure.
No, I'm hanging back for Wisconsin because I've seen Cole Center quite enough. I've seen Wisconsin quite enough. Being able to see Cooper Flagg, and that might be my angle, is just watching Cooper Flagg and covering him and seeing Morez Johnson on him, right?
Probably Morez, yeah.
At least for a chunk of it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if you can activate Trey White a little bit. That'd be helpful.
A couple weeks ago, I thought Trey White, but then things have changed, obviously.
But just be prepared. I mean, there's not a lot of shutting down of Cooper Flagg, so it's how much you can make his life just a little more difficult. That's the goal with Cooper.
Mike, who's going to win the Big Ten title? It's I mean, if you want to put Maryland in that race, UCLA in that race, but feels like Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, look, Wisconsin's 2 games back right now. What's really interesting is Michigan and Michigan State play each other next. So either Michigan's going to be 14-2, or Michigan State's going to be a 12-3, or they're both going to be 12-3. This is a really big game for Wisconsin.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, right? Tuesday, the game. It's a really big game for Wisconsin, because after they play this game against Illinois, they have by far the easiest remaining schedule for those teams contending at the top, by far. So we'll see. I mean, Michigan has just been. I saw the other day the stat they've won 9 conference games by 4 points or less, and it's the first time since Wright State in 2007-2008 for a team to do that. And I don't think it's fluky at all. I think they just, Dusty May is one of the best coaches in the country, and you got a clear pecking order late game with Danny Wolf and these handlers, and Dusty May drawing up plays for these guys. I mean, Roddy Gale gets 2 point-blank layups off of plays that Dusty May drew up for him, and Roddy Gale was struggling the entire game. I mean, it's just this race is going to be so much fun, and the Big Ten tournament, which is here in Indy, I'll be there.
Wide open.
Is going to be just absolute carnage. I can't wait for it.
So many quad one games too in the Big Ten that's just so deep right now. Coach of the year, is it just going to go to whoever wins it between May, Izzo, and Guard?
Yeah, I think so. May's the leader in the clubhouse
Yeah.
for me right now. He's done such a good job with that team when everybody questioned the front court fit with Golden and Wolf and how he's made that work and how he gets those other pieces going. I think it's May right now. There could be media that leans towards Izzo just what he's done this year and breaking the record the other night. But and then guard once again, just making mincemeat of preseason rankings. He seems to do that almost every single year.
Is there any way John Tonje makes a run at Braden Smith for Player of the Year?
I mean, if Wisconsin wins the league, I think he's Player of the Year. I think so. Because I mean, if that's how we're going to do it with Coach of the Year, I mean,
yeah,
Michigan State's not going to have it. If Michigan State wins the league, they're not going to have a Player of the Year. But Tanji's been that good, especially late.
I'm looking over Kaufman-Renn, but Braden Smith's obviously the straw that stirs the drink there.
Yeah, Kaufman-Renn's been great, but he's nowhere near the Player of the Year conversation for me.
Right. All right, Mike. Appreciate it. We'll catch up next week after Illinois plays 2 top 10 opponents, man.
Hopefully have a lot of good stuff to talk about.